Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining me today. I've got the pleasure of your company here for about 40 minutes or so, and it's my intention to run through, as a reminder really, for many of our partners and some customers as well, the Compliance Blade and Smart event from Checkpoint. The reason we originally scheduled this was because there are a number of renewals which are coming up this quarter and next. Many times the Compliance Blade, for instance, is included free of charge when you buy Checkpoint, and it's included free of charge for the first year. Now, a lot of our customers either aren't told that they've got it for free or don't have enough reminders and so haven't used it. And also a number of our partners maybe weren't aware of this fact. As I say, it comes free during the first year, and at the end of that year, it's obviously our intention to make sure that everybody renews. And unfortunately, we have to pay for that during the second, third, and ongoing years. And the Compliance Blade is licensed as an annual blade, if you like, a renewal blade, in much the same way as everything else from Checkpoint. But certainly from our findings with partners and with end users, 90% of those people who have activated and used the Compliance Blade and Smart event will want to renew it in the renewal course, towards the end of the year normally, and only 10% of our customers who have not switched it on, obviously they haven't seen it, they don't know the benefits, they don't know why they would want to renew it, do so. And so it makes perfect sense to us, of course, to make sure that our customers renew this product. And in order to do that, we send out these reminder emails and we run these webinars just to make sure everybody's up to speed. So today is mostly partners. I know we have a few end users online as well. We'll get going in a second. Just as a quick introductory, my name is Kai. I'm the Compliance Blade and Smart Event Manager for Europe for Checkpoint. I'm sure you're all aware of Checkpoint. Arguably the largest and best network security company in the world. Everything I do talk about today will be in line with the product sets that are current and existing, if you like, from Checkpoint. So I'm not showing anything brand spanking new here. I'm not showing you anything that you would need to adjust your current systems or add anything brand new into it. Compliance Blade, as I mentioned before, is included free of charge for the first year. It sits within the management modules, if you like, of Checkpoint. So it isn't an extra security blade. It has no performance detriment. It has no effect, if you like, on any of the other blades that you may be using from Checkpoint. I like to get these out of the way early so that our customers and our partners don't feel like the Compliance Blade would interfere with any of the existing security that Checkpoint is offering. Moreover, I want you all to understand that certainly by the end of this 35 minutes or so, that the Compliance Blade and the Smart event are there really to enhance the offering from Checkpoint, and they are designed to make sure that you are getting the very best out of your Checkpoint systems. And to not have these, to not use them, really is a fairly large failing in our eyes, because ultimately we want you to get the best out of our system, and you need these tools in order to do it. So I'll get started. The things that I have at my disposal here, obviously I can fast forward through the slides. I'll try and show you as much as I can with regards to product as well as PowerPoint. I appreciate we're all stuck at home at the moment, and you've probably all seen your fair share of PowerPoint over the last 6 months or so. But I'll try and be as interactive as possible. So with regards to tools, here we have a chat box where you can freely type in any questions. If anything is unclear, if maybe I'm going too fast, if I'm not making any sense, I'd rather this were interactive and we had some kind of to and fro. For me, just to talk for 35 minutes, A, it's not a lot of fun for me. B, it's probably not a lot of fun for you either. But C, if you do have some questions, it's far better to ask them at the time than to try and save them up for the end, because chances are you'll have forgotten them by that time, or they won't be relevant to the screens that we're looking at, and we'll have to start panning backwards. So please ask away, please feel free, and we'll do a summary at the end, and we'll leave you with some contact names, numbers, and emails, that sort of thing. All right, Compliance Blade and Smart Event. We start with this slide just purely to show you that from talking to our thousands of customers worldwide, they respect and understand Checkpoint the best, if you like. And one of our key points, one of our key merits, if you like, within Checkpoint is our management and the fact that it is very simple to use, very easy to navigate your way around Checkpoint and find out the information that you need to find out. Now, in addition to this, this is the best security management, and that management point, if you like, the area where you access information, is made better, and it is only the best if you include smart event and compliance, which are there to help to reduce your labor hours, the amount of time you spend within the system fiddling around, and also try to reduce the amount of mistakes. So what about the compliance blade then? Well, the compliance blade is what we term as our automated trusted advisor. It's there to help to make sure you have increased security scores. It's there to detect any human error. What I mean by that is misconfiguration or poor setup or changes that might be made to the system which would make the system perhaps perform less than at its peak. And also there is a regulatory element here, of course. It's called the compliance blade for a reason. We have included many regulatory compliance standards that people need to follow inside of the product as well. So let's talk about some customer problems. Let's be very open about this. So over the course of the years, we run what we call security reports. Now, these security reports are available from Checkpoint, and the long and short of it is we run these security reports as tests to find out how well our customers are doing, how well they're using our product sets. And time again, we come back with very similar results to this. Now, hopefully this will make some sense to you. I'm sure many of you are far more technical than I am, but these results come back year after year after year. And what we're looking at here, I guess, are some key points from the firewall setup within large Checkpoint customers. Now, if any of you know anything about setting up firewalls, hopefully you will understand why the top left figure, 27% of corporates have included any except rules, and why that is a bad thing. Now, without teaching to suck eggs, an any except rule in your firewalls is simply saying to the firewall, let anything come through and let anything go out. All right. So rather than a firewall, what people are doing is they are setting these things up to be a wide open door. This is not helping their network security. This is not helping to keep anything secure within their networks. And certainly, this is going a long way against the grain of what Checkpoint is expecting. We want you to set the system up so that it is secure and simply doesn't sit wide open and let information in and out of it willy-nilly. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is make sure that simple mistakes are avoided and any misconfiguration and poor setup of the Checkpoint system is avoided by using the compliance blade, and I'll show you how in a second. But these are also our findings. Many times Checkpoint software is owned, but it isn't implemented. What I mean by that is a lot of our customers are buying from Checkpoint security bundles. Some of them are called NGTP, Next Generation Threat Prevention. Some is called Next Generation Threat Extraction, NGTX. And from all of those, what we're finding is that although those security bundles include a number of security blades, many times not all of those have been switched on and implemented. As I say, technology is implemented very often, but it isn't used. What I mean by that is, let's simply switch it on and leave it there quietly in the background, but not actually get any benefit from it. Or even worse, certainly from my perspective, is what they use is often not configured securely. And put simply, we're talking about customers of Checkpoint buying network security for a very specific reason. They want to protect their networks. And they're not doing this, they're not achieving this because they haven't configured the system correctly. It isn't set up in a way that will protect them. All right? It's very much like buying a car and not driving it. We want you to get the best out of our systems. We've given you what we call the best practices. They're all included within the compliance blade, and then we find our customers simply aren't using them. So many times our customers are, I guess, underutilizing Checkpoint software by up to 50%. So from all that good money that they've spent, they're barely getting half of their investment back. So how does it work? Okay, security comes as a part and parcel of following best practices. As you can appreciate, within Checkpoint, there are hundreds of best practices, and they're written by Checkpoint themselves and introduced into the compliance blade so that we can map or match, if you like, the way that the system is set up at the customer's site with the ideal way of setting up the system. So very much like following instructions when you set up a new TV or reading the driver's manual when you get a new car, the compliance blade is going to compare the way you've set up your system with the ideal. And we call these best practices. These security best practices, of which there are hundreds, by the way, are included within the compliance blade. And as soon as you switch on the compliance blade, it will be comparing then how the system says it should be set up with the way that you've set it up, and highlighting any areas of poor configuration or bad setup, as we talked about before. In addition, we also have security best practices from the legal aspect, if you like, and from compliance regulations, things like GDPR, which came out last year, still a big force in the world, ISO standards, security standards, that kind of thing. They're also all included within the compliance blade, and you can switch these on or off and have scores come back to tell you how well your network security system is running or not in accordance with these security regulatory best practices. And then we also have a section for best practices which can come from either the customer or from the partner, maybe based on their location or maybe based on the type of business they do, so their business vertical. There may be security best practices that they want to implement which are specifically relevant to the way that they do their work. For instance, airlines, banking, commercial, public sector, and so on. And we have the opportunity then to add these into the compliance blade, A, to make it more sellable to more customers, but B, to make sure that it fits and is in line with those best practices that you have to follow or the customer has to follow because of where they are and what they do. Once the system is switched on, it is then forever looking for any errors and will give you alerts if there are any. So on the first day, you will receive a report from the compliance blade which will highlight precisely where within your system you've misconfigured anything, the setup isn't good, and you can start to put those right. The alerts can then also happen automatically, or you can receive reports either by request or on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so that you understand 100% how things are going within your system. And this is also particularly relevant to partners where maybe the partner is managing the system on behalf of the customer. They need to know that the customer isn't fiddling about and making changes that will have a negative effect. And conversely, the customer should be able to see that the partner who is managing their Checkpoint estate is running it in the best possible way and is not misconfiguring the system so that any gaps in their security appear. So again, I like to be very open about this. So what we're talking about here is, what about the customer objections? What might be the customer objections to having the compliance blade? Why would they say no? And I like to be very open and frank here. So number one, and the one that we hear the most of, is we're only doing a renewal. We're about to renew our Checkpoint estate. This tends to happen towards the end of the year where the majority of our business is done. The renewal is, let's replace like for like and only replace the things that we have from Checkpoint. Number one, I need to explain to you again, this tool sits within management and is normally offered free of charge for the first year. So the customer really should have been told about this already and should be using it. And now might be our chance to make sure that the customers know about this, because when we come to the Q4 end of year renewals, which tends to be silly season for renewing Checkpoint's tools, we need to be sure that the customer is going to renew the compliance blade along with everything else. And explain to them, this is not a new product. It lives within management and has no effect on the performance or anything else that Checkpoint might offer. It is there to help to make sure you're getting your products out and making sure that Checkpoint is working 100% efficiently. And I would ask them as well, why renew without checking that the investment is working properly? Why are you renewing all of these tools from Checkpoint when the compliance blade, maybe at a simple glance, can tell you that you're barely using 50% of what you've got? We want you to get the best out of Checkpoint. We want you to be successful in your network security, but that will only happen if you're following best practices and following the guidelines that the compliance blade is offering. Without the compliance blade, you simply won't know what those best practices are. And the first time that you will understand or learn about any misconfiguration is when bad stuff happens. Surely it's better to know before than wait until the bad stuff happens and try and fix it all. So the other thing that we hear a fair amount of is, I'm just way too busy. I have 10 other projects running at the moment. I haven't got time for a compliance project. Please understand, number one, the compliance blade is here to increase efficiencies on the things that you're doing within Checkpoint anyway. So for instance, what about all those unused and old rules? Many customers have tens, hundreds, or even thousands of different rules and setups within their Checkpoint configuration. Now, why have so many? Chances are many of them are unused and old. So one of the first things that the compliance blade can be asked to do is look through all of those rules and find any that are unused or old, and maybe we'll go about deleting those because they've been sat there for so long. Remember, all of those old and unused rules are slowing down the process, and certainly within firewalls, that firewall has to spin up and read all of those rules before it starts applying any security. So it's pointless having them there. It isn't best practice, and that's exactly what the compliance blade is about. It's about following best practices in order to get the most out of your system. And also understand, compliance blade is already implemented within the management. As I said, it sits there until it's activated, free of charge for the first year, is chargeable for years thereafter, but it has no effect on anything else. It's just a checkbox to turn it on, and from that point forwards, you will know any areas of misconfiguration or poor setup. We're hearing a little bit of also on the right-hand side here, maybe they're using similar tools. AlgoSec and 2FIN are mentioned fairly regularly. It's great to hear that the customer is using these tools. It means that compliance is big on their list. These other tools are marketed as compliance tools, reporting tools, that kind of thing. But also most of our customers have both our products and those. And many times, in fact, the two communicate with each other. And please understand, we're not looking to replace those. Those are quite expensive, admittedly, but they are post-event reporting tools normally used on firewalls where a customer has multiple vendors, so Checkpoint and others, and they're making sure that those tools are working together to provide security. The compliance blade from Checkpoint is purely to do with Checkpoint, but all of our products, all of our different security blades, from URL filtering to any and all of the others, the compliance blade is a purely Checkpoint product, but it is there to look at far more than firewalls. It is looking at absolutely everything that you're using from Checkpoint. And also understand, the compliance blade is giving real-time monitoring, all right? Not just history analysis. As I mentioned before, AlgoSec, 2FIN, those kinds of tools, ordinarily, they will be providing reports after the event, sometimes days, weeks, or even months after the event. Surely you want to know if there are any problems with misconfiguration. You want to put them right as soon as possible rather than waiting days, weeks, or maybe even months. Okay. Also, just to give you a little bit of a heads up on our Checkpoint differentiation, on the right-hand side here, we have a number of Checkpoint's competitors. You'll be familiar with those, I'm sure. Please understand that those competitors have no compliance blade to speak of at the moment. They are investing a lot of time and money developing them, and that tells me two things. It tells me, number one, I've got at least a 10-year head start on them, and two, it's telling me, I'm absolutely in the right space, because otherwise, why would they be investing time and money to develop a product like the compliance blade if it wasn't necessary? They've obviously decided it is, and they're just playing catch up now. And as I mentioned on the right-hand side, the Skyboxes, the Firemons, the 2FINs, the AlgoSecs, we don't compete with those. They're predominantly firewall-based, We're monitoring all of Checkpoint's products, not just firewalls. Those other tools tend to be post-event, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, and their cost is fairly great. We are fully integrated and we're identifying issues in real time. So really, we're not competing with those. If anything, we could call them complementary and non-competitive. Okay, so what about regulations? We're talking about compliance here. Please don't think for a second that this product is designed and sold to compliance officers. It absolutely isn't. It's sold to anyone who is using the Checkpoint products and is responsible for network security. So what we're doing with the Compliance Blade is helping customers to validate that your Checkpoint products are all working properly, making sure that your investment in Checkpoint has been well spent and you're getting value for money. But also, of course, when we're trying to make sure that the system that we've provided is giving you its best security. But, we do have all of these regulations. So what can we say about compliance? What about the standards? What about the regulations? Into the Compliance Blade, we've fed a whole bunch of these from UK Data Protection Act, which later became GDPR. We've got the British standards, we've got ISO standards, we've got NIST, which is an up-and-coming standard, started primarily in the States, now coming over to the US, the UK. But we also have PCI, we have ISO, as I mentioned before, Sarbanes-Oxley, if you have any dealings with the States. They're all included within the Compliance Blade. You don't have to add these, and I'd like to add here as well, you don't have to be an expert. We're the experts. Let the Compliance Blade check those out, and it will tell you then if you are or not in line with those key standards. So what about compliance itself? I've been working in compliance now for over 10 years. So my view of compliance is you need to look at 3 key areas. You need continuous monitoring, which simply means you need a system that is running and checking on an ongoing basis whether or not your system is working properly. That's what the Compliance Blade does. You need auditability. What I'm saying here is you need to be able to show through records who did what and when, what changes were made, what effect did those changes have, and if any of those changes, as I mentioned before, would have a detrimental effect, a negative effect on the setup or the configuration of Checkpoint, then the Compliance Blade will tell you there and then that those things are not in line with best practice. We're trying to make sure that the customer's commitment to Checkpoint, is in accordance with our standards. And then, of course, there are those technical regulations, there are requirements like GDPR and ISO standards. Yes, of course, they're all included within the Compliance Blade. And if you need those reports, you can have them. I like to stress here, though, that unfortunately, despite the fact that we have GDPR and ISO standards included in the Compliance Blade, these cannot make your whole company compliant with those standards. What we're talking about here is quite specific. Is your network security system, in this case from Checkpoint, in line with those key regulations? It's around about 20% of the overall requirement, but at least you'll know here 100%, and you'll be able to provide a score. Many times these are provided to your compliance officers or maybe even to the auditors, where you can say, here are my standard systems, but I can show you in this report that our network security system is 100% or 90% or 80% in line with the GDPR requirements. And just to give you a heads up on how they look, so we took the EU data privacy standards, and what we've done is we've extracted from that the key principles. And these principles, if you like, are paragraphs of statement showing how a network security system should be used. And in this case, number 2 says the processing of personal data. Of course, GDPR now is all about personal data and its protection. Personal data to the extent strictly necessary and proportionate for the purposes of ensuring network and information security. So what we're saying here is, this key principle from GDPR, or as it was before, the EU Data Privacy Act, has to be followed in a certain way by using the network security system in a certain way. So in order to help people along, bottom left here, we have a sort of simplified, plain English description of that regulation. In the middle, it'll show you any areas of your Checkpoint system where those principles could have an effect. So in this case, you'll see that the firewalls have an effect. The firewall best practices are affected by this best practice, by this regulation, if you like. And 2 of those have scored good, but still need a little bit of work. 3 of those have scored secure, including your anti-bot, great. But you'll see at the bottom there, just as an example, URL filtering, which is Checkpoint's tool for making sure our staff are not looking at Facebook and porn. We are supposed to be filtering out the correct websites and making sure our staff are not visiting the incorrect types of websites. By not having URL filtering set up properly, there is a risk that the personal data that we contain within network security could either be accessed from the outside or sent from inside our network security outwards, and that is a breach in GDPR. We don't want that to happen. Bottom right, you'll see here 2 different areas of our business, 2 different areas of our network security are affected. The branch office looks pretty secure, but our corporate policies, down to medium, obviously need some work. This is the landing page in our current management of R80. If you have an older management level, R77 and the like, they look slightly different, but the look and feel of Compliance Blade is always very similar. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, so I'll just point you to the top left here of the report. You'll see we've got 187 best practices, we've got 12 gateways and 10 different security blades from Checkpoint, just as an example. And what we're showing you here is the overall score at the moment. Secure, we are at 61%, but poor, which is our very polite way of saying you are not following best practices, is currently here at 24%. 24% of our Checkpoint network security system has not been configured in line with best practices. So would you be happy with that? If you were in charge of network security, would you be happy that a quarter of your network security system is not being set up in accordance with best practices? I know I wouldn't. And I would click on that best case if this were a live view, and it would take me through to any areas of potential weakness, I guess, in our setup where our security blades are not performing because of misinterpretation or bad setup or misconfiguration. The middle score can show you all of these by security gateways or perhaps by location. If your company has multiple branches, so different locations throughout the UK or even throughout the world, we can show you here different scores for each of those. And over on the right-hand side, whether or not our security blades individually are performing in line with best practices. And you'll see here that because of the setup, because the way the customer or the partner has set up the Checkpoint system, our firewalls look pretty strong. Our URL filtering is only just over 50%. Our VPN, our IPsec is doing okay. Our IPS, intrusion prevention, which could be a critical mass in our network security system, again, is running at a fairly low score. So we could look to fix that, make those scores stronger, which in turn then would make us more secure. Bottom left, it's giving us a quick report on any pending action items, anything that needs to be sorted. Perhaps the network security manager could look at this on a regular basis. And then on the bottom right, we're looking at some of those key regulatory requirements again. GDPR as mentioned, PCI, HIPAA, NIST, ISO, and Sarbanes-Oxley. There are more in here. I'm just showing you 6 for the purposes of demonstration. So just as a simple run through then of Compliance Blade, that's just over 20-25 minutes or so. I hope that's been useful. Please understand again, number 1, the Compliance Blade is included free of charge when customers buy management from Checkpoint. So you may be a customer, you may be a partner. It may well be the case that you or your customers have the Compliance Blade already. It's free of charge. They just don't know about it and they're not using it. So it's a simple tick box to switch on. There's no training required. You tick the box, the Compliance Blade is working. And when they then come to renew, we're all hoping that they will want to renew the Compliance Blade, having had that free test drive already. It has no effect on anything else. It sits within management, so it doesn't slow stuff down. It's very simple to use, and it is there to make sure that the best practices, the very best way of using Checkpoint is being followed and adhered to so that Checkpoint can give you its best security. Here's another analogy. You know, a racing car is only as good as the setup. Okay, you know, if you put square wheels on it and no suspension and a bad engine, you know, the thing won't win races. Checkpoint's the same. You need to set it up in the right way, in line with our best practices, so that it can give you its best performance, so that it can give you its best security. And if you don't know about this misconfiguration, you know, that'll never be put right. Okay, so that's the end of the compliance blade for now. I don't know if there are any questions. I can't see anything in the comments box at the moment. Feel free to ask now, or you can get in touch with us afterwards. As I have a few minutes left, what I thought I would do is also share with you our smart event product. So if you think of the compliance blade as the left-hand pillar of Checkpoint, it's there designed to make sure you're following the best practices and using the Checkpoint systems in accordance with best practice. Over on the right-hand side, the other pillar that we have is called Smart Event. Now, Smart Event is all about making sure that you have 100% of this threat visibility. It's going to show you everything that's going on within your Checkpoint system in real time. So we have customizable visibility. We have the ability to give you real-time forensic and event investigation. What we're talking about here is if anything happens within your network security system, you need and want and deserve to be able to see it in real time. If there is a threat, we need to know about it real time, not days, weeks, or possibly months afterwards, and certainly not when whatever that threat is has had a chance to spread. And more than that, we want to give you a unified view. So somewhere you can go to see absolutely everything, rather than looking at each individual security blade and gateway and different status within the system. You need one place to go. The reason we're doing this ultimately is that there are more and more attacks. Now, using our threat cloud, which monitors the world, we've seen up to 100 attacks per second on average. Now, you'd be very lucky if it was all happening to you. What we're saying here is that somewhere in the world, there are attacks going on all the time, and 100 per second, you know, frightens the hell out of me. That's a lot of attacks. Let's try and make some sense of those numbers. Let's take a potentially large Checkpoint customer using our network security who during the course of a week has experienced, you know, normal traffic in and out and around the network. What I'm showing you here is, if you like, a needle in a haystack, because during the course of 1 week, the Checkpoint system has created over 43 million logs. Okay, now these are taken from a genuine Checkpoint customer as sample documents, but ultimately, over the course of the week, Checkpoint system did 43 million things. Underneath that, then, there were 107,000 instances where Checkpoint has located some kind of threat. So if you imagine a house, something went past the house, you know, the wind blew, a bird flew, a worm crawled, a rat skulked. You know, there were things going on around the house which are potential threats, which didn't attack the system. Underneath that, though, there were actually 75 security events. What we're talking about here is somebody or something tried to get into the house, to use the analogy. So something tried to get into their network by hook or crook, and Checkpoint managed to stop it, okay? Whether it was some form of intrusion, some form of malware, some sort of threat, ultimately, Checkpoint prevented those, and that's 75 instances during 1 week. Underneath that, and this is the critical number, there were actually 4 instances where some form of action was needed. And what I mean by that is somebody had to react to a potential threat and do something within the system. Checkpoint couldn't tackle this all on its own. They needed to do something about it. So out of a potential 43 million logs, and hopefully you've all seen these before, these are logs, I could either A, try to look through 43 million logs, or wait for something bad to happen and then work backwards to try to identify what it was, how we could prevent it, and how far that threat has spread. Or we could use Smart Event, which takes all of those logs, uses our matrix, if you like, and identifies any threats from within all of those and turns it into one single view, which is what we call Smart Event. Okay, so what we're talking about here then is a system which takes all of that information, puts it into one single unified view and makes sense of it. So let's look at the information I've got sampled here. Just as an example, you'll see along the top here, 4 users received malicious mail. Okay, if I was working with anything to do with network security, I'd like to know that. More than that, 3 hosts downloaded malicious files. You know, this is the sort of information somebody in network security needs to know. But more than that, we have 1 infected host. And again, if this were a live system, I would click on that link and it would show me precisely who that infected host is, where they are, where they've been, and the type of threat that they've downloaded. All right, so we can deal with it on the fly as quickly as possible. Other notes of interest, you know, along the bottom here, you'll also see some spikes. And this graph is showing IPS, which is intrusion prevention, and antivirus, fairly self-explanatory. Now, hopefully, if you can see this clearly, as I can you see any areas of peaks from intrusions and potential viruses during the course of the day? And is it fairly clear to you, as it is to me, where these peaks lie? Again, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs, but it looks to me like it is during the middle of the day where these peaks occur. And what happens during the middle of the day? The staff take their lunch and they go browsing on their laptops. They're looking at websites where potential threats may live. You know, it may well be that either we need to switch on IPS and antivirus to a more effective level, or we need to limit the amount of access that our staff have either to these potentially dangerous websites, or maybe they shouldn't be browsing there at all. But whatever the reasoning, we need to understand what those threats might be. And it looks to me that every single lunchtime has a peak of intrusion prevention and antivirus that could ultimately be fixed. So what we're talking about, again, is real-time forensic and threat investigation. So the system then is taking all of those millions of logs, it's identifying those as a potential threat using the Checkpoint database and its systems. You know, it's reading the matrix, if you like, it's identifying what those rules are, what we can do about them, what is the remediation, you know, how can we fix those? Ultimately, are we able to respond to those security incidents immediately rather than finding out about it, as I mentioned earlier, hours, days, or potentially weeks later when that threat has become much, much larger? It's very easy to customize your reports in the system. You know, you can see exactly the information that you need. Management may want different reports to help desk, may want different reports to the auditors. It's all very easy to set up. I think there are endless possibilities for different types of KPIs, key performance indicators that you may want from the system. We have bar charts, we have pie graphs, we have daily, weekly, monthly flow diagrams. You know, very easy to generate these reports and create these standards and set up the templates for yourselves. It's ultimately all about having the ability to see any potential threats in real time. In fact, many of our Checkpoint customers who use Smart Event will have one large screen up on the wall dedicated to Smart Event, which will then change, if you like, and alert them through some sort of flashing light or klaxon or whatever, real time, if there is a potential threat, so that they can deal with it there and then. There's no point waiting. Okay, in summary, what we've talked about then are the Compliance Blade and Smart Event. Compliance Blade is here to help to make sure you follow best practices, you follow those key regulations, and the Smart Event is there to back all of that up with real-time and forensic evidence to give you the ability then to set the system up, to get the best out of Checkpoint, and also to see those results. As I mentioned earlier, many of our partners don't know about this, and we're using this webinar today to educate them, to make sure that they understand that a lot of our customers already have these products and they're coming up for renewal either this quarter or certainly next quarter. We need to make sure that they understand what they've got. We need to make sure that they understand what the products do and are able to do for them. And moreover, we need to sell those products to them by letting them use them to see the benefits, so that we will all get the renewal at the end of the day. And the products, will pretty much sell themselves. We just need to make sure they understand that. Ultimately, following best practices is good for a reason. They're not called best practices for nothing. They are the best practices for a reason. And seeing real-time threats, seeing any potential danger to our system in real time and having this smart view, has got to be the smart way to go forwards. So, as I've been saying to my boss for some time now, we want you and the customers and all of our partners to work smart, not hard, by using these Compliance Blade and Smart Event tools. Thanks very much for your time. That's almost exactly 40 minutes. I hope that was useful. I didn't see any questions come up on the screen. That must mean that my presentation is superb and you're all understanding every word that I'm saying. If not, feel free to write through questions here on the chat box. Otherwise, you can contact either myself or you can contact our Arrow team, who very kindly organized this. I'm going to share some details with you now if I can. Gemma, you have the control. You're able now to share your screen if you'd like to share your details with anyone.
Hey. Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Kai. The comment of the year, right? So thanks, Kai. That was a really excellent overview of compliance and smart, and I certainly like the idea of working smarter, not harder. I'm just going to try and share my screen now. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat box, so I just really wanted to leave this webinar and close off with some contact details in case you want to get in contact at a later date. So if you want to send in some questions or have any further information, then you can email us on checkpoint.ecs.uk@arrow.com, or you can phone our Checkpoint hotline on 01638 569 616. So no questions coming through, so please feel free to get in contact, and thanks once again, Kai, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar today.